You're listening to The Builder's Mindset with Mike DiGiovanni, presented by Amazing Mindsets. Welcome back to another episode of The Builder's Mindset. Happy almost Thanksgiving. It is Thanksgiving week here in the U.S. And I like to tell people, funny, the week of Thanksgiving, in my opinion, in my 20 plus years in home building, is usually slower than the week between Christmas and New Year's. I have some theories of why that is. And actually might as well talk about it because that'll lead right into like what I wanted to discuss on today's episode. So I think that the reason why this week is slower than between Christmas and New Year's is because, well, first of all, the big thing is Thanksgiving is always on a Thursday, and so a lot of home builders take off Friday as well, and then as we all know, the Wednesday before any kind of holiday weekend or whatever it may be, you know, you get like a half a week, and it's the year is in the bag. We've talked about this, and this is what's going to lead into today's topic of the year end and how it looks for you and what is the difference depending upon the department you're in and or public versus private. And that's what we're going to talk about a bit today, more than anything else, is public versus private, I think. And then we can go into, in some of the other episodes, the difference between the departments as it relates to the year end. So, you know, it's I just always find it interesting. I feel like this week coming up is the slowest week for home building in terms of, like, if you want to take time off, take a vacation, it's the best time. Everybody comes back the Monday after Thanksgiving, and it's kind of like, it's all okay, it's all good, no big deal. And I think that makes it really quiet. Whereas between Christmas and New Year's, particularly for the publics, there's a scramble, right? Like, there is a scramble, and I know if you've been here and you've been in this place, please drop some comments down below as a, you know, just put a note into the comment for the episode. It can be insane. The last week of the year can be just utterly insane. Now, it does have a lot to do with where Christmas falls, right? Christmas can be, you know, any day of the week. And I foolishly forgot to even look, so I'm not even sure where Christmas falls this year in terms of what day of the week it actually falls on. Let me think about that. I believe it's in the middle of the week. So, but there's a lot of stuff that can happen, and a lot of builders are trying to get that finish line, and there's closings going on, there's walks going on, and so that's what I want to talk about. Like, just, I don't know, after the earnings report for Q3 for most builders, we talked about, but Q4 for some. So a lot of builders are trying to finish their year and get their number. And so the difference between home builders, public versus private, and I'm curious, you know, I've worked for 3 publics and 2 privates. And I have to say, from my experience, and I know that's just my experience, you know, there's a lot more pressure for that number. And like I tell people all the time, home builders, like, everything's about closings. It's all about closings, deliveries, whatever you call them in your market. It's all about the deliveries. It just seems like a whole other level of intense when you work for a public. And I said, I've worked for a couple privates, and look, yes, at the year end, you want to get as many closings, and there is sort of a sense of pride that comes with, oh, we planned 300 closings, so we want to get 300. I've worked for builders where it's been like, hey, we'd really like to get to 225, you know, but if we end up at 202, you know, it's okay, you know, it's all right. We'll get them in January. It'll be fine. Because they're not on that cycle. They're not on that. They know that everything they're doing is going to be rolled up to a regional number, to a corporate number, that then they have to, you know, produce results for the market. The other big thing is, a lot of the bonus structures for the divisional employees is based around, metrics, closings in particular. You say you're going to hit a certain number of closings, and so you want to deliver on that. Look, I believe that. Like, I'm a big advocate of, I like balance, and if you know me, we'll talk about balance and whatnot. But I also believe that the best balance comes from having a plan and a goal, establishing what's the goal, build a plan to achieve that goal, and then staying in front of it and not waiting till the last minute. Early on in my home building career, though, Richard Dugas, the former CEO of Pulte Homes, used to go around to these town halls, and I remember he put up these charts, and it was essentially, I don't remember the exact numbers, but roughly. He showed nationally for Pulte, and this was back in 2004, he showed nationally for them the number of homes they close in the last week of the month relative to the monthly closings. And I want to say it was something in the neighborhood of 38 to 40%, right? So perfect world, it would be about 25%, but it was 38 to 40%. Then he showed the number of closings that happened in the last quarter of the last month of the quarter, similar thing, 40, 41, 42%. And then he showed the number of closings in the last quarter of the year, similar results. And that has stuck with me we're 20 years away from that now. And that's stuck with me in that, in my opinion, human nature tends to be like, there's always tomorrow, right? Like, we always believe there's a tomorrow. And side note for another day and not for this channel, but there's not always a tomorrow. You're not always guaranteed tomorrow, right? So think about that, right? Now, if I believe those statistics, if somebody ran those right now, we would find that they're about the same. Like, we would find that most home builders close most of their homes in, a disproportionate amount in the last week of the month, in the last month of the quarter, and in the last quarter of the year. And it just kind of shows you that human nature. And so thereby then, guess what happens? You're busy between Christmas and New Year's. I think there are some builders who've gotten really creative and they try to incentivize. We could take off between Christmas and New Year's if we've already hit our number and hit our closings, and try to push that psychological human nature to not let things drag on and become later and later. But it's hard. It really is hard. And so publics and privates, like I said, I'd love to hear everybody else who's listening, like, what are your beliefs? Have you worked in a public and a private? And do you agree that it's a bit more intense at the end of the month, end of the quarter, end of the year than it is as a private? And then even if you just, let's say, just worked at publics, maybe you could say, hey, I've seen it both ways. Some builders are, not as intense, some are. And then maybe if you've only worked at privates, you can say, am I wrong? And maybe I just happen to work for two builders that were a little bit more kind of, easygoing about things, or plan things pretty well. I would say in my time at privates, I worked at one, I would say that was a little bit more easygoing. And I worked at another one where they just executed the plan a lot better. And so that's my advocacy for you, even if you are a private. And I know I have friends who private for years and years and years, and they love to dog the publics, and, they call them big box builders, et cetera, et cetera. Look, at the end of the day, I don't care if you're public or private. You're putting a goal in place and you're trying to achieve that goal. And the incentives I've seen sometimes are not in line and sometimes they are. I often find, though, that the incentives really are just about the end. The incentives tied to what we call a lagging indicator, right? So lagging indicators like, our goal is 100 closings this month. And whatever, 1,500 for the year, 100 for the year, or 800 for the year, whatever it may be. Closings, although it's a goal, that's great. It's a lagging indicator. You look at it when it's done and there's nothing that you could do about it. And so I think that if we want to change some of that behavior, which is really that sort of behavior that allows us to let things go a little bit further. We got to work on the leading indicators. And what are some of those leading indicators? There's some builders out there that I've worked for that have some great ways to measure this. And I think tying compensation some way to this can help the whole team as well too. And that is shooting for, by the middle of the month, having, 35 to 45%, or 35 to 50, or 40 to 50, 40 to 55% of your closings for that goal, whatever that goal is. If the month is 100, if you're trying to get 100 that month, that by the 15th of the month, you should have somewhere between 40 and 50 closings in the bank. And it's sort of this cycle that we go through, that we scramble at the end, and then the first week of the month, we relax. We scramble at the end of the quarter, and the first month of the quarter, we relax. I've often, counseled people on scheduling, trade scheduling meetings or things like that, and go, no. You can't schedule a meeting, on the 27th of September or the 25th of September. That's the last month of the quarter. And, that builder's going to be just scrambling. So some of those metrics are more leading rather than lagging. There's some other ones that are, you can look at, like, on an individual home basis. If you're driving to getting out of your bigger trades, your front end trades, let's say your rough mechanicals, on schedule, on time, and watching that to me is more of a leading indicator rather than, looking at the back end. Worked for plenty of builders where, they're always behind schedule when they come out of those rough mechanicals, and then they're trying to make it up on the back end. And like almost everything on the back end is like 1-2 day schedule items, not the front end where you've got 3 days to 2 weeks for things like mechanical, rough plumbing, rough HVAC, or framing. Those are the times when you actually have some real time that you can stay on schedule and give those back end trades that have only 1 or 2 day cycle, the time that they need to get it done. And so looking at those leading indicators, I think, is some of the things that can help these builders stay in front of things, breed and facilitate and foster a culture of, actually looking ahead, focusing on what's to come before it actually comes. All right. So, but like I said, I'm really curious more than anything else to hear from all of you if you've worked in both or just one, like, just to get your take on it. Like, what do you think about this? Am I off base when I say that I truly believe, for the most part, public builders are just more driven by the numbers, and thereby creating a higher level of anxiety, stress, and pandemonium in the last week of the month, the last month of the quarter, and the last quarter of the year, and thereby, as I said, between Christmas and New Year's typically. So and go back to it, like, there is some impact as to what day Christmas is on. If Christmas is on like a Thursday or a Friday, and you've got, like, really on a Friday, and you've got like Monday through Thursday of that next week before the end of the year, I feel it's like really intense. If Christmas is on a Monday, and then you've got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, it can be really, really intense as well. From that perspective, it gets a little weird when Christmas is on a Wednesday, right? Because then you've only got Thursday and Friday, really well. But then you have Monday and Tuesday as well. So it's intense. It can be intense. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think about that. And, let's see if we can't, try to focus a little bit more going forward on those leading indicators, and how do we, ahead of the game, as we're finishing up this year, as we're about to roll into January pretty soon here. We've got, I don't know how many exactly days, but we've got about 40-ish calendar days left. So that probably equates to somewhere in the neighborhood of, we've got about 25-ish, 26-ish working days left to go. Let's see if we can think about this and challenge yourself to think about this and ask yourself, if you're at a builder and it is one of those builders that it's typically chaos and pandemonium at the end of the month, what can your builder do? What can your organization do to avoid that next year? Think about that. Okay. So anyway, that's all I want to talk about, because, the earnings report. If you haven't gotten the earnings report summary and market assessment, we'll put the link in the show notes. Grab that for sure, so you can get your hands on that and see what you think, see how the public builders did in the last quarter. And with that, thanks again for tuning in. Thanks again for listening. And we will see you next week. Or you'll hear us next week. Have an amazing day. Thanks for listening to The Builder's Mindset with Mike DiGiovanni, presented by Amazing Mindsets. Remember, your mindset matters.